Kazuha is a really amazing 4 out of 5 character. He's not just a more expensive SUCROSE, he's not just a worse venti, and he is a really good pull no matter who you are. And honestly, the last time I called a character a good pull was almost 6 months ago at Ganyu. So yeah, if you're looking for a really fun character, or you like its design, or you're just looking for a strong character, Kazuha is highly recommended. That's it, no caveat! But that's not why you guys are here. You guys are here to learn more about Kazuha, why he's a complex character. Do you need Kazuha if you already have venti? Well, let's answer those questions one by one in today's video. Let's actually start with the playstyle. Putting full EM on the VV set on Kazuha is definitely the way to go. However, he does have minor ER issues, so you're gonna want either a sacrificial sword for ER, or either want a phonius sword on him. Now, if you don't have either, then you can do something like the Iron String and then just run a ER Sense on him, or perhaps you're running like Freedom Sword or other weapon. The only time you really build crit is like if you're using him against single target and you're using him as a main DPS, so like you don't really care about buffing your teammate with Elemental Mastery at all. Now that is something you could do, but for majority of the cases, you should be building Elemental Mastery on Kazuha. And while we're here, you can level your Elemental Burst first and then equally level your Elemental Skill and your normal attack. Anyway, the top version of Kazuha's Elemental Skill will create a small section, putting you in the air and allow you to do a follow-up plunge attack, also putting it on a shorter cooldown in comparison to the whole version, which do a much bigger AoE but with a longer cooldown. Note that his top Yi have a 5 meter radius and only apply a weak anemo, while his whole Yi have an 8 meter radius and apply strong anemo, which could be useful for breaking shield. Do you know that your Elemental Skill will take a significant amount of field time? Kazuha taking so much field time to perform his action is a huge problem for users that rely on normal attack to trigger, like Xingqiu's Rain Cutter, or perhaps Beidou's Elemental Burst Stormbreaker. In compared to SUCROSE, who can just drop her Elemental Skill quickly, this is not a problem for SUCROSE. Because of that, be careful of your rotation and when are you gonna use Kazuha's Elemental Skill to group. Unfortunately, his Elemental Skill also does not apply a continuous suction force, which make it really hard to group monsters, for example in the Morgana Alter team. Here you can see that they're not grouped up well, which loses me the entire Ganyu Elemental Burst synergy, and even when I recast Kazuha's Elemental Skill, they're still not really grouped up well, and once again lose me the Ganyu Elemental Burst synergy. Depending on the situation that you need it in my opinion, Kazuha's Suck is definitely not as good as venti, and in some cases, even SUCROSE. Kazuha's Elemental Burst create a 10 meter radius domain, which can be infused with an element and continuously apply the element and doing damage. It will also do the original Anemo damage on top of that, so it will not be overridden just because you have an infusion. Pretty straightforward, not much to explain in here. Unlike venti and SUCROSE, Kazuha Elemental Burst is centered around him, which make it very easy to control which element you get infused using self-infusion element like Barbara's Elemental Skill, which apply Hydro to yourself. Otherwise, the infusion go from Pyro to Hydro to Electro and Cryo in terms of priority. Here, I have both Cryo and Pyro on the enemy, however, because Pyro have a higher priority when it comes to infusion, you can see that my infusion indeed does turn Pyro. The final and the most important thing about Kazuha is that when you swirl a element, you will grant all your teammate a corresponding elemental damage bonus for each point of Elemental Mastery that you have. And of course, this talent is what separates Kazuha from the other characters. Kazuha being able to do a tons of damage using his Elemental Burst and his Elemental Skill, and still granting his teammate a huge amount of damage bonus is what makes Kazuha really good. But the thing is like, oh, well, while Kazuha can do that, so can SUCROSE, or to some degree, venti can also do the same amount of damage while providing extra utility. So what do Kazuha do better than those two characters, or perhaps other characters? Well, let's take a look. Starting off with the comparison about SUCROSE and Kazuha, which everyone loves, Sucrose with a standard build should be able to give your teammate about 200 elemental mastery, while Kazuha running a sacrificial sword can give your teammate about 30% damage bonus. Now, in terms of which one of these provide more damage, that will depend on the character that you're buffing. Remember, to mathematically optimize your damage, you want to invest in the stat that you have the least. So for example, if you don't have a lot of elemental mastery, then getting extra elemental mastery will give you a pretty good damage boost in comparison to getting something like attack percent when you already have a lot of attack percent. For example, for my Diluc, I actually run a Wolf Gravestones which have a lot of attack percent on it. Because of that, I do not run a attack percent Hourglass, instead I just run a Elemental Mastery 1. Now, of course, the 4 set bonus also already give me Vaporize and Melt type of damage, which is additive with Elemental Mastery. In this case, I already have a lot of bonus in terms of increasing my damage dealt by Vaporize and Melt. In this case, the Elemental Mastery gift from Sucrose is actually not a lot. In comparison, I will actually benefit more from the Pyro damage bonus that Kazuha can give. So Kazuha can actually give my Diluc more damage than Sucrose can. Now, while I say that, the truth is actually they both give basically the same amount of damage. Both Kazuha and Sucrose will actually just give almost the same amount of damage to my Diluc, maybe with a minor difference. But that is until you consider that Sucrose can actually carry a book called the Dragon Slayer book. This Dragon Slayer book is just so overpowered, give way too much stat to the point where as long as you're carrying this book on Sucrose, it will outclass Kazuha in any situation, unfortunately. But what if you can buff more than one character on Kazuha? Almost every team nowadays have 2 characters actually doing damage. For example, when you're playing Diluc, your Seeing Shields actually does a lot of damage as well. Similarly, when you're playing something like the Childe Xiangling Vaporize comp, both Xiangling and Childe will be simultaneously doing damage. So what if you can buff both of them? Let's take a look at the Sucrose version and how it is played first. We start with Bennett and then switching to Sucrose, which Swirl the Pyro, decrease the Pyro resistance of the enemy, and then giving Elemental Mastery to Xiangling. We also then switch to Xiangling to get the Dragon Slayer book and finally start our rotation with the Pyro Nado. You'll see that in this rotation, we have no opportunity to Swirl Hydro, which decreases the Hydro resistance at all. While the book is really strong, there's a problem with the book, and that is you need to immediately switch to Xiangling as soon as you switch off Sucrose. That is because the book gives the buff to the next immediately character that take the field, so you never have the proper opportunity to Swirl Hydro. So now let's take a look at how Kazuha does it instead with a 500 IQ rotation. This rotation surely took a long time to figure it out, but it was surely worth it. Did you carefully observe and catch what exactly is going on here? Let me explain. We start the fight by entering Childe's melee form with his elemental skill, which apply Hydro to the enemy. However, we immediately switch to Bennett and use the elemental burst, which do a vaporize reaction of that Hydro. However, because Childe applies strong Hydro, this will not completely remove the Hydro aura from the enemy. As you can see, there's still Hydro remain on the enemy. We then immediately follow it by a Kazuha Elemental Burst, which wipe out the Hydro on the enemy, however also infusing his Elemental Burst with Hydro. At this point, you notice that the Bennett field have actually applied the Pyro onto Kazuha himself, and that's okay. Because Kazuha himself have Pyro status and Pyro have a higher priority than Hydro does, his elemental skill will actually be infused with Pyro and he'll swirl Pyro in the process of doing it. And of course, because he equipped it with the 4-set BB set, this will decrease the Pyro resistance of enemy. Switching to our Xiangling and snapshotting all the buff on her Pyro Nado, you'll observe that there is indeed an increase in the Pyro damage bonus buff. This is of course because Kazuha swirled Pyro. However, the next frame, you'll realize that Kazuha's Elemental Burst is still intact and is currently swirling Hydro. What that means is that it not only will decrease the hydro resistance of the enemy, but it will also give hydro damage bonus to our child who is currently on the field attacking. If you're fighting two enemy though, you can just apply one element on each and swirl both of them together to get the same effect. In general, doing these kind of double swirl will net you about 10 to 15% of DPS increase compared to using Sucrose. When you put Kazuha into your party, you gotta think about, oh, how can I swirl both elements so that it's buffing both of my party member? Little thing like this require a lot of thinking and it's very complex and it changes up your rotation a lot. Similarly, there's also a new trick with ganyu. Observe here that I currently have Pyro apply on Kazuha himself and Crowd apply onto the enemy. Observe how our initial Kazuha slash will actually swirl Cryo. This means it will decrease enemy crowd resistance but also give crowd damage bonus to our ganyu. However, observe that because we are self-infused with Pyro, the infusion from his elemental burst is actually Pyro. This will constantly apply Pyro to the enemy and allow us to get Ganyu's charge attack off. Once again, this nets you about 10 to 15% increase in damage. Now Bennett make it a lot easier, but it's not necessary in order to perform this trick. Using almost any Pyro character like Xinyan would be doing fine. Previously, when you're playing Ganyu, you needed to put xiangling in, which also means you need to have Bennett because you needed Bennett to battery xiangling. However, now that's no longer the case. You can drop xiangling, which also means you can drop Bennett, and just put in Kazuha and another Pyro character, for example, Ember. This is not only a lot easier to use, but it also saves your xiangling and your Bennett for the other team, which means you can potentially play something like the Chinese national on the other team, perhaps with the Sucrose back. Sucrose can't really do that and cannot fulfill the same purpose. Checkmate, Sucrose. You can even create a weird variance team like the Venti Kazuha with Barber and Fischl to do electric charge. Remember how I destroyed the Abyss with electric charge Venti? Well, just think of this as like a double Venti version of that. Unfortunately, we're not gonna dive into every team comp here because that would take way too long. Commonly, people ask, oh, if Kazuha can replace Venti in the Morgana team. Can Kazuha replace Sucrose in like the Hu Tao team? Or perhaps can Kazuha replace Sucrose as a Xiao battery? And unfortunately to those, he actually does not. And people might get disappointed because, well, they are thinking, why would I roll a character that is not going to replace Sucrose or Venti? But what if we were never supposed to replace them to begin with? From how I see it, Kazuha is a character that opened up new path for the characters. Depending on who you have and what is available to you, Kazuha can potentially open up new team comp, new idea, or new way just to play the game. Due to Kazuha having a big AoE on his elemental burst, he could also work better than Venti when used in chamber with multiple boss enemy. And surely this is just a boss event, but with Inazuma coming, maybe we'll see Genki in the Abyss as well. Kazuha also have a lot of potential with something like C6 Bennett. However, because currently we do not have toggleable constellation, I have not activated my Bennett yet and I do not know if I want to. We hope you'll really need to give us toggleable constellation because it will further increase Kazuha potential. Similar to how Kazuha is going to open up a path to Inazuma for us, he is also currently opening up path in different team composition. Currently, we're still working on discovering about many of the new team that Kazuha can do. However, I'll have to say, he have a lot of potential lying ahead of him. If you already own Venti, well, what if you just put Venti and Kazuha together to make some brand new team? You already have Sucrose, well, you can just put Sucrose on one side, Kazuha on the other side. So this lets you get grouping on both sides and a Nemo BB shred on both sides as well. At the end of the day, Kazuha is really only limited by your creativity. You can draft many new comp and open up many new paths for you depending on what is available to you. Now, does he open up enough so that he is worth your primo? Once again, you will have to decide that yourself. But for now, I'll say he is very future-proof. The thing with a support character like Kazuha, a unnameable one nonetheless, is that he will basically almost work with every character in the game. In my first impression video, I have also said this, but no matter which team I put him in, he does really well performance. He might not be the best, but surely he is doing pretty well. DPS character like Eula can easily be phased out in the future as you acquire more main DPS character. Perhaps in the future, you acquire Ayaka, and so therefore, you don't have a need for your Eula anymore and you stop playing with your Eula. Being a unnameable support means that Kazuha have a lot of potential to work with future's character. For example, when Ayaka come out, for example, when Yoimiya come out. Maybe Ayaka and Kazuha make a really good pairing. And surely, maybe Ayaka work better with Venti than Kazuha does. But Kazuha will still gonna be a really good pairing with Ayaka. Kazuha is still gonna be a good character with Ayaka. He's not gonna be bad just because he loses a little bit to Venti. Now, don't feel pressure to roll Kazuha just because of this video. Kazuha is definitely not a must roll, and that's why I did not put him at a 5 out of 5. A must roll indicate a character that is so broken that completely breaks up the game. For example, Venti. Kazuha is definitely a really good pool for most people. For one, he's really strong just by himself. He can dish out similar damage to Venti by himself. However, he can make some of your team even stronger than before and open up new paths for you. More importantly, he is very future proof. I still feel like he has a lot of undiscovered potential currently in the game, and when new characters come out, he's gonna have even more undiscovered potential. And honestly, I don't remember the last time I praised a character, but today is the day where I praise a character for once. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you think. See you guys all next time.